All right, excited to be here today with my new friend, Luke Mendoza. So, Luke is the co founder and CMO of Beatchain, which is a company that was founded in 2017, and they provide data driven artist and label services to the music industry. And he has a background in marketing analytics, held roles as a campaign manager and marketing analyst at MDSL. And I'm excited to have him on the podcast today to talk about something that I personally really geek out at. Like, I was a weird kid in high school, like math. And so like the economics of business and the music industry, I think are fascinating. And, for someone that has a background specifically in, economic analysis and digital marketing expertise with music, look forward to connecting today and sharing some lessons and insights for how artists who are listening to this right now can actually use their data to grow their career in a way that's measurable and that's not overwhelming, but actually gives them more clarity on how to do the things that matter to them. So, Luke, thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to it, Michael.
Absolutely. So, to kick things off, I would love to hear just a little bit about your background in terms of how did you find Beatchain? How did you co-found it? And what was the main purpose for creating the company?
Yep. So back in 2016-17, I was working with my father, Ben Mendoza, at his company that he founded and ran that was called MDSL, now Calero. And it was a expense management company, completely different to music, had nothing in common with this world. And for one Christmas party that we did, he had been following a band called Brother Strut on YouTube, and they did a crowdfunding exercise to fund their second album. And we got them to come down and play a gig for the MDSL guys who were based in the UK. And we started talking to Steve Jones, who ran the band. He was the MD of the band. And it turned out that he had a very interesting background. He'd had major record deals and always been frustrated. He wasn't generating enough income for that to support him. And then when he started Brother Strut independently, he did everything himself. So every piece of Facebook and Instagram marketing, he created the content, he wrote all the tracks, he ran the ads and business manager, he ran the merch store himself, stored all the merch before drop shipping was particularly useful. And he was running everything on his own. And as we started to talk to him and get to know him better, we basically found out that what that meant was Brother Strut were being very successful as independent musicians, the first ever independent musician to sell out Coco in London, so like 2,500 tickets. So really doing great stuff and making a lot more money doing that than he had played that gig with a previous band and they weren't independent, and he made about a fifth of the income. However, he didn't have any time to write any more music and to be more creative because he was constantly running the business side of it. And essentially what me and Ben saw as an opportunity back then was a world that we came from was all building software, building tech, and understanding data to make better decisions. That's all we did. And we thought, well, a lot of that could be applicable to what artists are doing back then, and it's even more applicable now. And so we built Beatchain. So Ben ended up selling MDSL in 2017. And at that point, we kind of saw our opportunity to do something new. And so myself, Ben, and Steve Jones co-founded Beatchain together, and it grew from there. And the sole idea of Beatchain has always been to support independent musicians. So by giving them as many tools and as much information as possible in one place, stopping them having to go from, however many applications and tools they have into one, we'd make their life easier and they could spend more time being musicians and trying to support themselves through that as a career. COVID was really tough for us because we were generating a lot of our early revenue through helping artists grow and then put on their first gigs, sell tickets, and then grow some more. And that's how we're doing. And it was looking really good pre-COVID. COVID came, that revenue stream ceased to exist. Live shows were just not a thing. And we worked with a whole host of companies over the COVID period to try and do digital in-home stuff. But we didn't really find that. And after COVID, we decided that we'd spent so much time building amazing tools, really robust platforms that can support artists, but we didn't have the stature as a company to tell the world. We didn't have enough budget, essentially, to tell independent artists that we existed in that form, that we decided to, Ben doesn't like this word, but pivot into a platform, an artist and label services company. So now what Beatchain does is we're essentially the Intel inside for other companies who want to work with independent artists. So we provide our platform, fully white labeled to Oddchild, who are an amazing label in the UK. And so you can go and do distribution on oddchild.app. And we also supply in India with Mozart Disco, which is a Radio City India initiative. And we have a number of clients coming up in the US over the next year. So we're very excited to start doing that. So our background was very different. And we ended up building a lot of technology and then accruing incredibly knowledgeable musicians and music business folks along the way. And so our company is now more music people than tech, maybe, or maybe half and half. But that's kind of how we got to where we are today.
Super cool. I mean, you definitely got my ears perked up when you're talking about it being a white labeled, solution to help music companies to distribute music. We should definitely have a conversation about our platform and what it would look like to have distribution tacked onto it.
Yeah, I mean, and actually on exactly that, we've actually recently, because we found that our major solution was a bit heavy for smaller companies to take on, as in like it just took too much time, because the way that we want to separate ourselves and the way we want to support artists is it not just be distribution, but it be distribution with a purpose. And that purpose in some of the bigger ones is if you distribute your music through Mozart or Oddchild or any of our other imprints and arenas, you get points essentially based on what you do as an artist. And that means for every release you do, you get points. For every stream that each release you do, you get points. Every time you put a post on Instagram, you get points. Everything that you do that's part of your music career that's building into it, we've essentially gamified. We normalize it all and then we gamify it. And if you get to the top of any of the leaderboards, then our arena sponsors, we call them, our clients, put forward amazing opportunities that will massively boost your career. So with Oddchild, for example, Shay Ryder, who got to the top of the leaderboard last month over a 6-month period, is now doing a recording session with Avelino, who's a huge rapper in the UK. And that kind of opportunity for an artist, with a few thousand monthly listeners, does not come around very often. To then go and do a recording session with someone with 700,000 who's worked on tracks with H and Retro 2 and Stormzy and, just unbelievable names is a huge prize. But even underneath that, they also offer studio time and mentoring and things that they can offer, which are part of what they do as a label, but without them having to sign artists. This is the whole thing. It allows them to work with independent musicians, allows musicians to distribute their music properly and all the metadata to be well, and then to keep all of their rights. And then if they do really well and they win these prizes and their career grows, then our arena sponsors get all of that first party data, because obviously they see everything the artists do, and they can choose to work with them in a more formal way. They can choose to sign them if they want, but it doesn't hinder those artists from pursuing anything they want to do. So that's a big part of what we're doing. So sorry, I know I cut you off there. And so the new lightweight version that we call imprints, we're talking to lots of smaller indie labels and music companies and saying, we can do this on a much lighter basis. If you only have like 1 or 2 cool prizes we would compete for, it's still an amazing reason for them to come and put their music out with you and get all of the other services that you can offer as add-ons to that. That's how we want to do it. We want to partner with more and more. We want to be the kind of Intel inside and make something that's really usable and really simple for people to interact with.
Really cool. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to exploring that more together. And one question I have for you related to your background and expertise. I think the mix of marketing analysis, economics, and digital marketing right now is a really interesting time to be an online business in general, just because of the way that data flows between the large social media networks. And there's so many like information silos where artists don't necessarily have like access to that information. So yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on, having worked with, a lot of artists now in different ways and the providers as well. What do you see right now at the time of recording this as some of the biggest challenges that artists are facing as it relates to the topic of managing their data?
Yes, I think you pointed out the biggest single problem that faces all of independent music, which is the siloing of data and the fact that companies that you need to use for some things can store your data and basically make it incredibly obtuse for you to get access to it. And I'm particularly thinking of ticketing companies here who do not play well on average with your other data providers, whether that's wherever you as an artist releasing, choose to get your information about your socials or your streaming and your fan base in general, which often are three separate areas, but that's one thing we can discuss. I think the biggest challenge is definitely breaking down those silos. And then once you do, normalizing any of that data so that it makes sense against the other things that you're doing. Because when we started, the world was very different in 2017 in terms of how social numbers were interacting with real life and recordable data. And the big thing that we did at the early days of Beatchain, and that we worked with all kinds of different providers on, was trying to understand, if I have 5,000 fans in Tallahassee and I want to do a gig there, how many of them, if I give them enough warning and I promote it adequately, will end up coming? Right? That was the first question we wanted to answer, because we realized that even back in 2017, it's got worse since then. But back in 2017, if you wanted to survive as an artist, you had to work out a way to monetize your fan base. And the easiest thing you could do is play a live show. I say easiest. It's not easy. But in the terms of relativity, that's the thing that every growing artist wants to be able to do anyway. Everyone wants to walk out on stage in front of fans and play songs, or we found that to be 99% of the artists we're talking to, that's something they want to do. And it is a huge revenue generator for independent musicians. But the major problem they had was, we had this rule of thumb, which is like 10% of your fans in any area, according to social media, with plenty of prior warning and adequate promotion, would come to a gig. That was our rule of thumb. We could be off by 5 or 10% on that, but that was about right. So if you had 5,000 fans in Tallahassee, you could maybe sell 500 tickets. The problem then became much more complicated with the falling off of Facebook, the growth of Instagram, and the arrival of TikTok, all year on year on year. And now your numbers do not correlate in any meaningful way with the number of tickets you're going to sell. And so what we're having to do now, and this is something that, which is a problem for the industry at large, is we're having to do, like, not retro or vintage, but quite old school methods of marketing. Like, I mean, previous recording, we'll talk about email lists. That's incredibly valuable. Getting people's phone numbers and emails now is way more valuable than accruing fans on Instagram or on TikTok, which seems bizarre. And that challenge now basically is forcing a lot of artists who want to be truly independent. And when I say truly independent, I don't mean no manager, no live agent, nothing, though that is still a very good option. But I mean, who don't want to take an indie label deal even, who want to own their rights, who want to monetize on them. They're having to kind of fight a kind of old school fight now for people's attention. And I think one of the things that we've seen in terms of the massive changes in data is now indie labels are no longer, on average, nurturing talent early doors and bring them up. They're taking bets on artists who have already done a load of investment into themselves, who've already got growth numbers on TikTok. TikTok is an issue that we'll discuss at length, I'm sure. Now indie labels are only betting on people that have a runaway thing on TikTok or Insta or whatever it might be. They're leaving a huge gap in the market, but that gap is not well serviced for artists to understand what's going on. And one thing we're doing at Beatchain, and honestly, not even an advert for Beatchain, if you go to any of the commoditized distributed platforms out there, is you can now understand better where your streamings are coming from and their demographics. And suddenly, if you're getting a mailing list, if you're getting phone numbers, and you come on Beatchain, which you can sign up to, or Oddchild for free, and put your artist name in, you can OAuth into your Instagram account, and we're Meta partners, and you can actually see a map of where your streaming numbers and your Instagram fans overlap. You can't do that for TikTok, and that's another issue there. API isn't there yet. But what we've been trying to do is exactly because on that problem, we've been trying to come up with a solution that makes it easy for artists to actually just see it. So now they can go in and they can maybe say, okay, I know that I say you're an artist in the US, I know I've got 1,000 Florida mobile numbers, and when I go on to Oddchild and I put my name in, I can see that I've got 2,500 Instagram followers there and 6,000 Spotify listeners, monthly listeners there. I reckon I can do a gig to 150 people. Suddenly you have enough data there to do that. Again, I'm very passionate about data in music. And I can go on a long time about it. But to answer your question, the major issue is breaking down those silos and finding platforms, whether it's ours or anyone else, who could help you understand more of that data in one place, normalized and kind of put together in a way which reads well to the artist. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it at the moment.
Got it. That totally makes sense. And yeah, just to recap, what I'm hearing you say is that, and maybe for folks who might be listening to this who aren't sure, like, what does a silo mean or what is the concept? So it sounds like what you're saying is that one of the biggest issues is, with the quote unquote silo, basically meaning like, Facebook or Spotify or Ticketmaster or some of these companies, like they have the information of who those fans are, what they spent, what their contact info is, and their names. And the artist who actually sold the tickets, or actually like has the followers, might not necessarily have ownership of that data, and it's kind of spread out.
100%. That is exactly it. And even beyond that, the depth of data that companies like Google, Spotify, Ticketmaster, Live Nation have is unbelievable. Like, if you had access to that information, not saying that every artist needs to become an expert in data analysis or anything, but there are people like us out there who, given that information, could normalize it and make it usable or readable for you. But things like Spotify know when and where people and how people are listening to your music, whether they were leaning in, leaning back, which means, did they actively search for you on one of their playlists, or did you come up on a radio play, another playlist they were listening to, and you just came on next? They know things like whether they listen to your song when they're on their commute to work or at the gym. All this information is out there, and it's actually incredibly useful, because that's exactly the kind of information that, if you understand how your music's affecting people, changes the way that you advertise yourself, changes the way that you build your messages, that you make your content. If you find out that you're an indie band, but one of your tracks just hits really fucking hard and everyone's listening to it in the gym, suddenly, if you're advertising that track, you could choose on Facebook Business Manager, for example, or you can come to, again, shameless plug, come to one of our partners and use our ad builder. And you can choose things. We will build audiences that will be around fitness targeting and things like that. Like, little tweaks makes the money that you're spending promoting yourself much more effective, makes a huge difference to what you can do as an independent artist. Because it's the difference between getting, a 75% view of a bit of your content becomes a retargetable person. That's someone that you can put in an audience for later and say, okay, I've got more content now. I've got a new song coming out. I want to hit everyone that's looked at 75% of my previous videos. They've definitely interested in what I'm doing. They're going to really like this, I think, and I want to see how it goes. Getting more of them makes it much cheaper the next time you want to do that. Or even when you're doing it for free, when you're just putting reels out, you're not promoting them, you're not doing anything like that. Having an engaged previous audience gives you a boost in the algorithms. So there are lots of things where understanding your data and understanding how people are interacting with your music, the stuff that you've done, is actually incredibly valuable and makes a huge difference to how you spend your money. And try the other thing, which is really hard for indie artists, and I have this conversation a lot, is they might get a budget together of like a few £100, a few $100s, and they're like, what should I spend it on? Shall I do a playlist promotion campaign? Shall I do Facebook and Instagram or TikTok advertising? And it really depends artist by artist, but like, it's so hard to tell people that you can run these ad campaigns, but the cost per click through to your Spotify is like $3, $4, $5, and the chance of that person then becoming a follower of you is slim. So you might get 20 listeners for it, and then they can feel a bit defeated. And so I think a big change that will have to happen is a lot of these companies need to break down their silos and allow third parties and artists themselves to get all the data they can and to better understand their audience, so that when they do come to spend money on telling people that they exist, that there's new albums out and then new merch is dropping, that they're going to play a gig, that they actually reach those people. In the meantime, doing things like building a mailing list and actually talking to your fans that might come on your Insta and just replying to comments and getting them to, maybe go and put their phone number in, is the best thing you can do. It's a hustle, but if you want to succeed as an independent, you need to hustle. That's basically where we've got to now.
100%. Yeah, there's so much good stuff there. So to summarize, part of what you're sharing, you mentioned this concept of like we need a way to normalize the data from all these different silos. So it sounds like what you're saying is there's all these different silos, all the different companies that basically host profiles of your fans, but you don't know who they are. The company knows, has a lot of depth in terms of who they are. And so what a platform like yours does is it sort of brings together the information silos and tries to normalize it or kind of summarize it into a source of truth. So you actually have a better understanding of who your fans are. And when you know who your fans are, that is going to ripple out across everything you do in terms of advertising, marketing.
100%. And actually, on that, what we've actually built, and this is not a pitch again, this is actually just for information, is what we built is we've taken everything that we can do as a tech platform that you can get for free, and we've put it into one place. So while it's not as deep as we can go, when we're working with artists more deeply, when they're on our Discover platform, which are independent artists who are growing at a certain rate and who come to use us for editorial playlist pitching or stuff like that, we then take on things like their mailing lists and their more manual stuff. And we have a team that will then normalize that data against all the other stuff we have on them. But any artist anywhere in the world can go to oddchild.app, which is our local one, or if you're in India, moves.disco.com, and they can sign up for free, put in all of their socials and their streaming name and all their IDs on DSPs, and get all of that information actually normalized and overlaid on a big map. We even bring in the things like how, like Spotify gives you information about how your track is in terms of its musicality. Like, is it upbeat? Is it downbeat? All that kind of stuff. That's all in there. We can show you how popular you are compared to similar artists in your specific genres and subgenres. And this all comes automatically. And you get it for free forever. Come and use it. It's awesome to look at. And it gives you a really good basic understanding of where you're making an impact. And even that, while it's not as deep as you can go, just means that maybe it'll give you a better idea of what kind of content to make or what kind of music to make, because you can start understanding your demographics and where your music's fitting amongst your peer group. And just giving it context like that is one thing. And even just seeing all of your peer group and how they're performing next to you is quite handy, because if you want to reach out to them on Instagram and say, maybe we should do a collab, it's free.
Super cool. Well, like always, we'll put the links in the show notes for easy access. Sounds like a great opportunity to explore the platform. What this gets me thinking of is I'm sort of like a really big idea, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this as someone who clearly has as steeped in the depth of this data and being able to integrate this into practical ways to connect with fans. But what I'm understanding is that this platform allows you to integrate with some of the other providers that basically are siloing that kind of have this data. And as much as possible, using their API, you're able to, using the artist ID, basically say like the audience details for that artist on that platform. And one question mark that I have, I feel like at some point, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be something that emerges as a solution to this. But there's also, I don't know, there's a lot of ways this could go wrong. So I think how this happens would be a big thing for the world, is a source of truth as like a user that's cross network, across these different platforms. Because like with the integrating from an artist level, it sounds like one of the issues you're pointing out is that each of these platforms really is like very tight with their data. You don't necessarily have access to all of it. And if there's a Spotify user that's the same person as on Facebook, you can't necessarily tell Facebook and Spotify, hey, this is the same person. And obviously there's like privacy issues with like, if you could do something like that, like how do you make sure that the user has, access to that and understands that and wants that to happen? Obviously there's a whole sort of controversial thing happening with like our data. Like, a lot of it isn't necessarily transparent in terms of like how it's being used. So there's been a lot of movement towards more transparency and sort of like user data. But I'm curious if you think at some point there'll be like a source of truth. Like imagine if each of us had our own identity that was like one, instead of like a bazillion different profiles, we have like one source of truth that's linked to us. We can go to these platforms. We can say, yes, I want to give you permission, kind of like OAuth. Like if I'm going to a hospital, like you have access to my health data temporarily. And just what are your thoughts about that, the idea in general?
I love, obviously that would be wonderful. I think the major issue is in Europe and the EU and the UK, GDPR basically stops you doing that. There are lots of rules about how you, as any company, can collect and use data. And one of the big ways around the big companies and a lot of these companies that are siloing data and getting around it is they automatically anonymize like the person against their record. Because back in the day, he says, you used to be able to upload mailing lists to other companies. So if you said, "Oh, here are all the people that have bought T-shirts from me from my shop. I've got all their emails. I want to retarget them, not with just an email, but I want to retarget them and audiences like them on Google and Facebook Business Manager." That was pretty easy to do. It's much harder to do now, and you have to be incredibly careful about what rules are going. And that's true across platform as well. So that golden source of truth. The challenge is Spotify aren't going to tell you that Michael Dot Walker at Modern Musician Studio is the same one as the one that's on Instagram and is the same one as the one that's on Google that search these things. Like back in the day, that's what cookies basically were for, right? While you didn't have to have the name, you could target audiences that had done certain things. That was the idea of it. I would love that as well. And actually, I think the one thing that we're going to see, one of my predictions of what's going to happen in independent music particularly, is as these kind of older school ways of promoting yourself come back, that more and more companies will realize that, because right now, at whether you go to Indie Week or Music Biz or South by Southwest, wherever you're going, all the new tech companies that are coming out seem to have some kind of direct to fan relationship. That's the big hype in the industry right now. And so I think there's going to be a world where all those big companies see lots of artists who are their kind of gravy train moving off platform. With companies we work with, like Even, you can put out releases early on Even for a small fee so that your biggest fans can listen to that. And that's a huge win. And I think as that happens, as they get more popular and a few big ones that win out, which I think probably will happen because that's how everything happens in every industry, I think those big companies have been siloing data will come up with ways to allow you to re-engage that audience on their platform. And that will be as close as we can get to like a single golden source like you're talking about, because then artists will be able to basically say, here are all my fans that I've accrued from all my hard work, from whether it's from YouTube membership, Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, even whatever the thing is. Now I want to find them on Spotify and tell them I have an album coming out. Now I want to find them on Crates and tell them I'm doing a limited run of vinyl. Now I want to find them on Instagram and tell them, oh, you've heard all my music, you follow my playlist, come follow me on Instagram and get that information there. I think that's how it will end up going in the next few years, but only time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely speaking my language, and Modern Musicians, Street Team, this is a core part of the movement. And like you mentioned, this is happening right now because there's such a big need for it. Like because of the data silos, because you can't talk to your people on Spotify, you can't actually notify your people that are following you without them happening to see it across bazillion other posts. So there's just a big need for it. So I think it makes sense that there's this movement towards it.
I do have on exactly that. I have one other thing which I've been banging on about for ages and I'm obsessed with. And actually in the US it's more difficult. So this, I'd love to get your opinion. In the UK we have the Small Venues Trust, which is fighting really hard to stop independent music venues closing down. And where there's a levy coming in on every ticket that a major player is selling to any of their venues, whether that's Live Nation, AEG, anything like that. £1 of that, or equivalent of $1, basically goes into the Small Venues Trust to help keep small venues alive. And so the small venue independent music scene in the UK and Europe generally is starting to bubble up again. It's starting to look really exciting. And with that in mind, every time I meet new artists who are just starting out and they start talking about streaming numbers and getting a TikTok hit, I basically say, stop doing that. Make some cool music, go to your local venue. If it's just your pub, local bar, and say, how much does it cost to, rent this to play for a night and I can bring my friends and family down and whatever. Because what we're finding is bars often have a sound engineer that they use for gigs that you can get on the cheap. They'll often let you rent it out for like $50 because they want you to bring people to come and drink in their establishment there. And what you get is for $150, you could maybe charge $10 a ticket to your friends and family, to anyone that has followed you so far, to come down locally, build up your fan base locally, because you get loads of amazing organic content of your friends and family filming you playing. That spreads out. You can use it on your socials. It spreads out from them telling their mates to come down. If you put on a good show, you have a great time. That old school organic, and I don't know whether you swear on this podcast, but I'll try not to swear too much.
You can if you want.
Basically, fuck waiting for A&R to come and find you, because A&R men no longer roam the bars and clubs so much. They sit on TikTok with a bunch of interns and hope they find the next one before someone from Warner does, whatever. I hate that. I think it's awful. Go and play locally and start building up, because if you have the talent and whatever it is, that drive, that hustle that the best indies need, then that's the best place to start. It gets some money trickling in. It gets some hype coming up. It really does so much more for you than trying to predict what music you could make that might go viral, which is just a horrible sentence, right? So that's something I really want. And I don't know whether in the US you think that's a really viable strategy in terms of finding local music venues and bars that could support you.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the right direction to go, is just like direct connection and building relationships and building your community. And who do you have the strongest relationship with? Probably your closest, family members, friends, people in your social network. And one of the things that we did with my band when we were first getting started, about like 11 or 12 years ago now, was we had zero fans. We grew up in a very small town that had, not really a music scene. We discovered that when we went out to one of our favorite bands performing live, they had thousands of people waiting on the sidewalk to get in. So we approached those people and introduced ourselves, shared some of our music. And our music was not great back then, but the strategy worked incredibly well. It worked so well that there's 6 of us in the band, and we split up into groups of 2, and we followed 6 different tours where we kind of bounced between different tours for about 6.5 months. We sold 24,000 CDs doing that. And that's what helped us to land our first tour with a band called All Time Low.
Yeah.
And eventually we were fully independent, but we went on to release an album that hit number 2 on iTunes. And it was 100% from the strategy, what you're talking about in terms of starting, by building relationships, by building connections. And, we started by playing local shows. Like, I'm sure that this isn't always the case now because online has, really like blossomed. But I still think that for the majority of successful artists, like a big part of their story has been building their local communities and having the network, having the relationships that they're building as a prerequisite before they start to really expand.
It's good to hear that. I mean, I know that independent venues generally have been struggling. I don't know if it's true across all of the US, but from where we have friends and clients and people that we work with, a lot of artists that we've worked with over the years, it does seem that some of them have like really robust local venues that they can go and play a lot, and some other areas are struggling. So like what's interesting is a company that you should definitely talk to, someone you should have on the podcast, a guy called Jordan St. Pierre from Something Dope for the People over in LA, building an incredible ground up music thing. Basically, it's like the ultimate open mic night. They put on these crazy open mic nights. They get a load of like A&R people, producers in, and everyone puts their name in a hat. And you go up and you get 2 minutes to play something, and you get like live feedback. It's awesome. It's really cool.
Cool. What did you say the name of it was again?
Something Dope for the People. And Jordan, he'd be a great guest, and he's a great dude. But one of the things that I noticed was in LA, it took an event like that for a lot of smaller artists to realize that they could go somewhere and play music for very cheap or nearly free and get some content out of it. Like, I think quite a lot of artists who are very talented can make great music and then either don't want to do the toilet door tour, the rat race kind of like tiny venue, or don't know that they can, floor walling is a thing. You can put on your own show by just asking most of the time. You don't need to have a special live agent. You don't need any special manager relationships. You can go into bars, pubs, clubs and say, do you have a way for me to rent this venue? And it's free for you to do. You can call them up as well. You don't have to actually go there. I do recommend it.
Maybe you can sync us up, Jordan, from Something Dope for the People.
I'll
Sounds
put
really
you in
cool.
touch. He'll be an amazing guest. They're doing some really amazing stuff. And they've now started going on tour around the US and the world, putting on open mics for artists to come and meet big producers and managers, and it's just an amazing networking event.
Super cool. All right. Well, man, I think we're approaching the end of our conversation here. And there's one thread that I wanted to pull back and wrap on, just because I think this is such a big idea. And I totally agree with what you shared in terms of when we were talking about the source of truth and like a single like user, and how like it would break a lot of privacy laws, and like there'd be issues with like having someone like share that with someone else. I feel like in order for it to actually happen, it would almost need to be some sort of like worldwide governmental agency that had like a individual, like a tracked user for each person. And who do you trust to be the arbiter of truth? Right? Like you wouldn't want that like to be centralized in like one source. So maybe that's where something like decentralization or blockchain or like AI could help with that. The reason being that, like you talked about the data silos, like the fact that there's a different Luke Mendoza on Facebook and a different one on YouTube and a different one on Google, although they might be connected, a different one on TikTok. Like it's just so inefficient. It's just inefficient because there's incorrect abstractions of like who you are based on incomplete data that's not all connected. So like just for the benefit of humanity, it seems like if we did have a trusted source of truth that we had more control over, where we could actually look at like, oh wow, this is who I am according to like my digital identity or my digital avatar. There's all these things about myself I wasn't even aware of. And like my goals are I want to become this person. And now all the platforms, like maybe they're serving you ads that like, I want to learn how to play piano. It's like, okay, cool. Like, because we know that about you, we're going to serve you ads about how to play piano. And I feel like at some point there's got to be something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so I am definitely no expert on blockchain or AI, though we do use it. I have a full tech team, obviously, who do this kind of stuff. We use AI and ML in our ad buying tool on behalf of artists so they don't have to learn how to do stuff. And you will have noticed over the years that if you go to your friend's house for dinner and they say, we're going on holiday to Costa Rica, and you say, oh, that sounds amazing. And then suddenly you'll be served ads to go on holiday to Costa Rica and all that kind of stuff. They are listening, and the technology is out there to do that kind of stuff. To focus on two things very quickly, back to back, blockchain, for me, and for what I have seen in people in the music industry doing, and this is just my opinion, and I'm sure lots of your listeners will be avid Web3 fans, and I know it can be quite divisive, so I'm trying not to be divisive. For me, it is a solution looking for a problem. Our CTO, Ed Godshaw, before he came to Beatchain, he worked at MDSL for a while, and then he worked at a blockchain development house. So he literally built code bases for people to use blockchain to do different things, whether that's centralized contracts, or this is kind of pre-NFT hype and then full. And what we thought would be really good is you could do it for ticket sales. And we had a Brother Struck gig that we wanted to put on at Brixton Academy, like 5,000 tickets. We thought this would be an amazing use case for it. We'll be, trailblazers, bringing blockchain into the modern music industry. What actually happened was the way that blockchain has to authenticate a ticket from someone having a digital wallet and having all the right stuff, not losing anything, having the right app, and then going to someone that has to have also the correct app and has to scan it. Then it has to go and follow some Herschel string and do an authorization check and make sure that through 8 levels of anonymization that is the right ticket for the person. It took too long. As in, like, we built and tested this as an idea, as a concept, and it would take a few seconds for the ticket to be authorized. But if you have 5,000 people coming into a venue, you can't, and you have 8 doors, it can't be a few seconds. So just in that one instance, blockchain literally is much less efficient than a QR code. Now, it might stop you, it might be a better solution until the moment of the gig, right? Where you can stop people having a grey market or a black market. You can stop the bots doing it, which is awesome. Now, that kind of application I get. But then still, at some point pre the show, you have to send everyone a QR code, because there's no way you can use the authorization string to properly check. And if you're going to send a QR code, then you have to work out how you're going to deal with people's data, make sure you get the right name against the right ticket and all that kind of stuff. That's just one tiny example. But even beyond that, we talked to lots of people about NFTs. We talked to lots of people about syncing their music in Web3 opportunities and on gaming and that kind of stuff. And there are companies out there which I can put you in contact with, like Token Tracks, who focus on that. And they're like really genuine guys who are building this cool stuff. But for me, again, it's a solution looking for a problem. There's no magic fix there. And there's a lot of ways that it can go horribly wrong. AI, however, I think is a force for good on average. I think we can use AI, particularly artists and managers and labels. There are ways to use AI to make things better. Like for me, the big one, which I'm telling everyone who has ever talked about it, building your EPK, you can do that with AI in a way that you definitely couldn't do before. You can upload all your music that you've made. You can upload your album images. You can upload your headshots. You can upload your stuff. You can link it to your Spotify. You can link it to all your digital footprint. And you can say, make me a really cool EPK so that I can send my demo to this guy I want to be my manager or whatever. That's something you can do for like $20 a month or whatever OpenAI's ChatGPT is, but there are a million others. That's something which immediately makes a huge difference to you as an artist or you as a manager or you as a label. Like immediately, suddenly, if you're pitching for a sync opportunity or a prize opportunity, or you want to get on a TV show, whatever the thing is that you want to do as an artist, having an incredible EPK built for you in seconds that you can manipulate and you can even get it to design it for you is awesome. Like the thing that artists have traditionally been terrible at is presenting themselves well to the people that can really help them grow. Like getting the right manager, the right lawyer, the right live agent, the right label when it's ready is the most important thing you can do as an artist. And the way that artists do it by having like shit demos on their WhatsApp and going, oh, this is my demo, is it's an awful system that it can be fixed with AI immediately. So while I don't know if there'll ever be a central perfect golden source, I think what AI can bring to what you can do using AI is incredibly valuable. And that's just one idea. You can get it to say, like, you can say, this is my demo. Go to, Dolby's mixing and mastering services using AI now are incredible, really good. And they cost like a few bucks. And you can say, this might just be my demo track, but for a couple of dollars, I can have it mixed and mastered really good. So when I send it to potential bandmates or I send it to labels, suddenly my demos sound awesome, and managers can understand what you're trying to do and get the depth and the sound that you're trying to create and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if there'll be a golden source for each individual user, that user way across, but I think from our insights looking out at the world of potential fans for artists and managers stuff, I think AI is incredible, and I think it's only going to get better and stuff, but I don't think it's going to replace anything we do. I'm not one of these like nihilists. It's like, oh, they're going to create every song with AI, all the plays will be AI. I have a lot of these conversations, and I don't think that's the case. I mean, I'm sure I'm probably wrong to an extent, but I'm pretty certain that if you just get good at using AI to do the jobs that are boring or annoying or you're not very good at, then it can help you do the things you are good at. And even on mailing lists, help me write an awesome email to promote this. And it can go and it can find examples for you and it can build it all. And it can show you how to build templates and on your drip campaign or your, whatever email service you use or whatever. It's just awesome. I think that kind of stuff, it means you don't need a bloody business manager or a day manager anymore. You can focus on making music and trying to pitch higher people up the chain and stuff.
100%. Yeah. What a time to be alive. And it's, the fact that this is the worst it's ever going to be, and it's been improving at such like a wild pace. It'd be interesting to see where we are 5, 10, 20, 50 years from now. But Luke, man, it's been awesome connecting with you today. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your passion for a topic that I think a lot of people might not be like, woo, like data, like woo, but it's so important, and so I think the perspective is really needed, and I appreciate the platform you guys are building to help to kind of fill that gap for artists. And could you just real quick share one more reminder if someone's listening to us right now and they are interested in taking a step further and signing up for the free platform? Where did they go to be able to sign up for an account?
Yeah, so if you're pretty much anywhere in the world right now, our biggest platform is on Oddchild. which is sponsored by Oddchild Music, a label out of the UK. And you can get there by going on to oddchild.app. We'll put it in the show notes. If you're in India, you can use muzartdisco.com. But what we've also done is we've put a code together, which is if you go on to and you sign up to any of these for free, if you want to release a track or put an ad campaign out, you can get 10 credits free using the code MM10 for the next week. And that is enough to release a single on every single distribution platform. And once you do that on all of those platforms, you also get all the streaming data. We get line level streaming data as the distributor. And that then feeds into your very rich, very free insights, which is awesome.
That is awesome. Cool. Well, like always, put all the links in the show notes for easy access. And Luke, thank you again for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure.